Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Bizarro Style episode. I am joined by my co-host Bizarro, and today we are covering bleed teams. Basically, we are covering team compositions, and for the first team composition, we decided to go for bleed teams. So, what's your take on that, Bizarro? First off, say hi. Sorry.
Goodbye. No, you're exactly right. We got the idea from one of our alliance mates, Bad Boy Bobby, to do something on team synergy or team compositions. And we thought it was a really good suggestion because the videos that we've seen out there are mostly on individual characters and what they bring to the table. But there's very little that I've seen. I don't know if you've seen anything, but I haven't seen much on team compositions and building teams around certain characteristics or certain effects or certain functions that they have. And so we wanted to start to do that. Have you seen any of that, Galahad?
No, I haven't, because a lot of people, they talk about individual toons and their abilities in game, but nobody builds teams around certain abilities. Like, say for example, today we're going to be talking about bleed teams. Nobody has put out a team that rotates around that typical type of function, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I think, so what we're really talking about is the idea of what's often synergy. And synergy is the idea that the four characters that you select together, using those four particular characters together is beneficial because in a way they all make each other better. And in this case, we wanted to focus on the idea of team synergy surrounding bleed teams.
Right, fantastic. So we use the word synergy a lot, Bizarro, but for our newer players, would you mind explaining what synergy actually means in the game?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think synergy is the idea that when selecting characters, you don't want to just select characters based on individual merit. In other words, you want to select not only on the individual merit, but also how they're going to work together when you actually run that team in PvP or whether you run them in the PvE.
The PvE missions.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the idea of synergy is thinking more about why are you putting certain characters together, and do those characters make each other better when they do come together as a four-person team.
Awesome, yeah. So basically summarizing that, they need to be a collective, cohesive unit that works.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah, thank you. So now that we've explained synergy, Bizarro, do you think we should go into bleed teams next, or do you want to list the characters next?
Well, I think we just generally want to say that we are covering bleed teams tonight as the first element of synergy or team compositions. And I think part of the reason we wanted to do that was because of one of the more recent characters that was reworked, who is a strong bleeder. And maybe that'll be a natural segue into talking about the characters that are bleeders in the game.
Awesome. So you have been using a couple of bleed teams, and you told me about it. I've been using a bleed team, although my roster isn't as expansive as yours, so Bizarro will have the video playing in the background as to the team that he's using. Let's go ahead with your team first, Bizarro. What team did you choose to use for your bleed team against today's meta?
So the team I've been using lately is, I think, some of the more recent bleeders that have either been created in the game or reworked in the game, and that's Red Hood, Manta, and those two are obviously primarily bleeders, but I've also been running them with Castaway Green Arrow for the turn meter down, and that also works well with Red Hood because he also has a turn meter down function as a team leader, which we can get into a little later in the video. And then I've been sort of rotating that fourth spot. Sometimes I'm running Man-Bat to get disease on enemies. And I've run other comps too with Booster Gold because he hits so hard. But we can get into that in a second. Which team have you been? Have you been running the lead team, Galahad?
So the bleed team that I have been running has been primarily with Red Hood as leader, of course, Talia as his second, and of course, because my roster isn't as expensive as yours, I've been using Power Girl as my main taunter, and then Black Adam as my blue. If I want to, sometimes I replace him out with Cheetah, but that hasn't been too effective for today's meta, so I just usually keep Black Adam in there. But
Right.
for some battles, when I do pair Cheetah against teams, say that don't have like a Wonder Girl and all that, and won't whip you to death, it is quite effective.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, surprisingly, when I was making the list of all the bleed characters in the game, I was surprised actually how few I have that are built up. And part of the reason for that, which we'll discuss in a second, is that when you and I were talking before the show, we were saying that a lot of the bleed characters are actually quite weak in terms of their relative position in the game relative to other characters. They're not very strong characters.
right.
We can get into that in a second.
Right. And yeah, I completely agree with you. Just to elaborate on that a little bit before we get into that, like some of the characters, like I was mentioning, Cheetah, she can't take a hit. So they are weak, they're a bit slow, but we'll get into that a bit later. So segueing into our next segment, do you want to add something to that, Bizarro, or should we segue into the next?
I think we should go ahead and talk about who all the bleed characters are in the game.
Okay,
I think
fantastic.
that makes the most sense next.
Right, so let's start off with the strongest. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, why don't we, if you don't mind, let's list them all, and I'll list them by affinity, and then we can talk about which ones we think are the best out of
Okay,
those.
perfect. That's perfect, actually, yeah. So why
Okay.
don't you go ahead, you take the lead on this one.
All right. So by my count, and certainly the viewers can correct us if we're wrong, but by my count, I have 19 bleeders in the game. And again, I organized them by affinity. And the first thing you notice is that there are by far the most bleeders are physical. And these are in no particular order, but these are the physical bleeders are Red Hood, Talia, Black Manta, Lobo, Robin, Dr. Poison, Joker Damaged Goods, Suicide Squad Deadshot, Poison Ivy, the Joker, the Clown Prince of Crime, and Killer Croc. So those are your physical bleeders, and there are 11 of those, which again make up the bulk of the bleeders in the game.
Right, absolutely. And let's go ahead into our mystic ones. We have, if I'm correct here, 6 mystic bleeders.
That's right.
In the game. We have Cheetah, Vixen, Silver Banshee, Aquaman, King of Atlantis, Siren, and John Constantine. So those are our mystic bleeders. And for energy, I'm going to let you have this one, Bizarro.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for me to talk about this one. There are actually only 2 energy bleeders in the game, and I'm one of them.
He is one of them.
So Bizarro and Chemo are really your only energy bleeders in the game, as far as I can tell. And actually, I was just reminded of one thing. I did include Joker, Clown Prince of Crime on the list of physical bleeders, but in my mind, I wouldn't really include him as a true bleeder because the only time he can apply bleeds is when he dies. So he's not really a viable option, in my opinion, for using a true bleed team because waiting on him to die is not what I would say is good strategy.
Yeah, you want to get those 3 stars if you can.
Yeah, I don't like relying on characters who either their death or deaths of your teammates really is what spurs them on, because to me, like you said, I want to win 3 stars.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered all the characters.
Yeah.
Let's get into our next topic, which is the 4th topic, which is our best bleeders in the game right now.
Yeah.
So let's get into that, and we can then talk about the best bleeders, basically. One got reworked recently, and he is the king right now, so everybody knows who he is. He is Red Hood.
Yeah, this was a great rework.
He is fantastic. He's not my favorite Robin. Like, I'm just going a little bit off track here, but yeah, Dick Grayson. Shout out to Dick Grayson, Nightwing. Anyway, so Red Hood.
I'm only a fan of Red Hood because Red Hood in the Outlaws includes Bizarro, so I gotta admit my biases too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I like Red Hood as a comic book character, but yeah, he's. I prefer Dick Grayson. He doesn't use guns, you know. And
right.
Because Batman is my favorite, so I've got a little bit of bias there. Anyway, coming back, Red Hood is fantastic because not only does he apply bleed, he also gives you buff immunity. Am I right, Bizarro?
Heal immunity.
Heal immunity, sorry.
Yeah.
Heal immunity. So basically that means is that the other teams cannot use their buffs. Say, for example, you have a taunter, and you apply heal immunity to that taunter. Then when they click their taunt, that basically won't happen. It cancels out that ability. So other than that...
Well, I think the other thing that makes Red Hood, in my opinion, the best bleed character that's out there right now is his leadership ability to apply, I think it's 50% turn meter down to the enemy team when somebody on the enemy team dies, because it's that ability that allows for the viability of other bleeders who might otherwise be too slow or not get enough opportunity to apply bleeds because he's giving so much turn meter down to the other team upon the enemy's death.
Correct, yeah. And yeah, he is very good, so we're just going to move on from him because there are videos about him out there, and he's basically the best of the best. If you want a bleeder, you want him on your team. Next, I'll let you take this one, Bizarro.
So we had talked about Black Manta, who is not a new character, but I say more fairly recent as opposed to some of the other characters in the game. And one of the great things about Black Manta, although I screwed this up with my own Black Manta, is you can actually give himself turn meter up as characters bleed and as mends are converted into bleeds. So he's the perfect counter to any mend character or any mend compositions out there. And the fact that he can give himself up, turn meter up when those mends are converted is invaluable. And that is why when we were talking about which teams we're using for bleeds right now, he's one of the main ones I'm pairing with Red Hood, because especially when his basic goes twice, he is applying tons of bleeds.
Yeah, I agree. If you have Black Manta like L2 or L3 and he's level 70 gear 11, pair him with Red Hood because he is the best. I would say he complements him, not the best, sorry. What I meant to say is he complements him very well. And like Bizarro mentioned, his ability triggers off twice, tons of bleeds. Me personally though, because my Manta is not that high level, I use Talia. And getting into Talia al Ghul, she is an all-rounder. She's not as good as Red Hood or Manta, but she gets evasions up. Her survivability is, I would say, a lot better than the other bleeders. And she complements Red Hood in the way that she also applies a tons of bleed. She has the ability to apply... I keep getting this confused, Bizarro. Buff immunity and heal immunity.
Right.
You know, but she has the ability to apply those immunities to characters so that they don't go out of hand with buffs.
Right.
And then you have Robin, who is Bizarro told me the fastest. He takes his turn first out of all the bleeders. And
yeah, with a speed of 128, Robin is the fastest bleeder that I can see in the game.
Yeah, that I remember too. Yeah, I think you're right. If we aren't right, tell us in the comment section below. We would love to hear your feedback about that. And anything you want to add to Robin? I think Robin is pretty self-explanatory. He goes invisible, applies bleeds.
Yeah.
Unless I'm forgetting.
He must be invisible first to apply the bleeds on his third move, where he looks like he's slicing and dicing better than the Chop-O-Matic. He is really I only fear him because he's fast, and I know he's even faster than Castaway Green Arrow, and so I'm always concerned about him putting the silence and bleeds on my character because he is that quick.
Right, and like Bizarro mentioned, if you don't have a taunter or a tank on your side, he will take out your blue. So be
Yes.
careful. And let you can have like the last one, Bizarro.
So I would say an honorable mention, because if you notice, all our physical characters, so we're dividing this up by affinity to say what are the best characters that are bleeders by affinity. And I would say, in my mind, I would say he's an honorable mention in the physical, but some people think he's a little bit stronger, although I am not seeing him a lot in endgame PvP, which is Suicide Squad Deadshot, who's also a recent rework, who somehow by looking at you applies bleeds to you, which I'm still trying to figure out. But I do think he's a strong bleeder, but for me, he was more of an honorable mention.
Right.
What do you think of that, Galahad?
For me, well, it depends. Like, I agree with you. He is an honorable mention, but like mentioned before, like some of our viewers, like they're newer players, they don't have the access to, say, like Red Hood or Manta. I mean, if you're a newer player, you probably don't have access to him either. But somehow, let's say you got him, I would say he can be used in your team if you don't have Manta or Red Hood or Talia. You can pair him with Robin and you can use him, you know?
Yeah, you make a good point, because, actually Suicide Squad Deadshot used to be one of the rarest characters in the game. And I think he was one of the last few to be legendary for me. So you make a good point about the accessibility. If you do have access to him, he's really good.
Yeah. But only if you don't have access to like the others, like Red Hood, Manta, or Talia.
Exactly.
Right. So going on ahead from our physical, let's get into our mystical. So our first mystical is John Constantine. What do you think about Constantine, Bizarro?
I have not had a lot of chance to use Constantine. Mine is only legendary 2, and I have this rule that I make myself stick to, which is I won't upgrade anyone who's not at least legendary 3. So I have not used him a lot, but he reminds me a lot of Deathstroke, in the sense that he really benefits from teammate deaths, and that he becomes more powerful as his team dies. So when I have seen him, and I have seen him a lot, he's often paired with revive characters so that he gets that turn meter up and applies more bleeds and intelligence downs to your team when you're facing him.
Right, I agree with you. I haven't used him a lot, but from what I've seen, you do need people like Solomon Grundy and like Doomsday, Lobo, these revivers.
Yeah, Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing, yeah, he's the biggest one. For you to basically make him effective. And after those tunes die and revive, he does become a nightmare. But then again, it's like no point, because you need 3 stars, right? So
yeah, that's what I'm always fighting for.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Constantine's okay. He's yeah.
I mean, there's no denying he's a strong character, because when you face him, you got to take him first. And so I would say for defense, if you're somebody who wants to pay more attention to your battle log, he's very good for defense.
Right, he's good on defense. I agree. And moving on from Constantine, unless you want to add something, Bizarro.
No, I think we covered him pretty well.
Yeah. What do you think about Banshee? I haven't used Banshee at all, so Banshee is all you.
I know Banshee had the recent rework, and I know she's a much stronger character as a result of that rework. I have not used her a lot myself, but she is very effective when it comes to bleed teams, and particularly because if you start to gain some momentum in killing the other team, she does a nice job of applying the death immunity to teammates and gains some turn meter up, if I understand her kit right. So she is, to me, one of the more dangerous mystic bleeders. I don't like facing her.
Yeah, I agree. From what I've seen, like I've mentioned, I haven't played around Banshee too much, but from what I've seen, she's a good counter to Power Girl, just like Killer Croc is apparently. But other than that, I haven't used her much, and I have to take Bizarro's word on this one. So moving on, Siren and Cheetah. Now, me and Bizarro were like a little bit divided on Siren and Cheetah. So I'll go first. I think Siren is better than Cheetah just because she has more survivability with her evasion ups. If she can get those up and another enemy toon misses her, then she can start stacking more bleeds and more bleeds. But on the other hand, I'll let Bizarro talk about Cheetah, but on the other hand, I'll also praise Cheetah here because Cheetah does give you those strengths up and whatnot. But for me personally, like, more survivability is key. But Bizarro does bring up a good point. He had actually several points about Cheetah, and I'll let him take over for Cheetah.
Yeah, so my argument for Cheetah over Siren was that, so first of all, Cheetah is the second fastest bleed character that's out there with a speed of 123. But not only that, I think her value as a team leader, focusing on bleeds, and also the fact that her third move can give her team 25% turn meter up. Because one of the things we're going to talk about with bleed characters is that they tend to be slow. And because they're slow, on average, I feel like there's more value in Cheetah simply because she helps to speed her team up, particularly when a lot of those characters who need it.
Correct. And like mentioned before, like, Siren is now more available, but when you're starting out, she's not going to be as available. So for that, I would have to agree with Bizarro that go for Cheetah. She's really good early to mid game. Depending on your team composition, she's a good late game too, but then again, they're better options these days.
Siren's been available for a pretty long time in the red alerts, but it's harder to farm red alerts. So right. I agree with your point that Cheetah's going to be one you're going to be able to get a little earlier than Siren.
Exactly. She's more available. And Siren, I would say, like, they're better options than both Cheetah and Siren. They're just like the two blue bleeders that are, I would say, similar. But it's honestly, like, when it comes down to Siren and Cheetah, it's up to your personal preference.
Yeah.
And last but not least, I'm gonna let my awesome co-host take this one away.
So, if you're gonna pick out of two energy characters that can apply bleeds, you got to go with Bizarro. That's all it boils down to. Chemo is one of the slowest characters in the game. His speed is only 81, as opposed to Bizarro, whose speed is 113. The other thing I think that I bring to the table is that Bizarro can taunt, and there are not a lot of good defense characters in the game that are bleeders. And he's one of the few that can go early, and he can give himself that taunt. And if you choose the right legendary ability, he can also have death immunity on his first turn. So I think, it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't want to offend any of the Chemo fans out there, or Chemo. I don't know how you say his name.
You're going to offend probably like all 10 of them.
Yeah. So I know there's like the Chemo Core or something in our game.
Really? Is there?
Alliance? Yeah, there's some sort of alliance built around Chemo.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And this is going to be, you watch, he'll end up getting a rework and be the greatest character on Earth next month.
My God.
What I'm talking about. I know I'm biased because I use the Bizarro handle, but I do think he's the better bleeder in this case.
No, definitely. I mean, you'd have to be, no, definitely. He's, let's say Chemo is like the green version of Blue Beetle.
Yeah, I kind of like Blue Beetle.
No, please don't. Next thing you know, he's gonna get like a L5, like Rebirth 2 Blue Beetle.
Yeah. Now my Blue Beetle's right where I need him to be.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, moving on from that. Wow. Sorry, guys.
So those, I think, are what we felt like were the best bleeders by affinity. But now you think we should talk about the best bleed teams?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's get into it.
All right. So I think you'll agree with me on this, Galahad, I think one of the things I mentioned before is that one of the problems with putting together bleed compositions is that bleeders tend to be slow. And so when you're putting together a bleed team, it's really hard, in my opinion, to put together all 4 characters that do bleeds and to have effective defense and to be able to go fast enough to really make use of the bleeds.
Right.
So for that reason, I think you almost have to bring in non-bleed characters.
Oh yeah,
And
I agree.
yeah. So for me, I have found 2 ways to speed up bleed teams. The first is the use of Brainiac, because whether he's in a team lead position or not, he gives his teammates 15% turn meter up at the beginning of the battle, which almost allows every one of your characters to go first, unless they're just extremely slow. Chemo, excuse me. The other method you could use is Castaway Green Arrow, because his AoE will apply 20% turn meter down, effectively making your team faster. And those are the 2 ways I've tried to speed my bleed teams up.
Right. And yeah, I agree with you. Like, you pretty much hit this last point home. I don't have much to add, just that I agree with you. They speed your teams up, and you honestly can't. In today's meta, it is very hard to have. It is extremely hard to come with up with a 4 bleed team that's viable and that will get you 3 stars.
Yeah.
With Brainiac and Castaway Green Arrow, you can get 3 stars, depending on the team that you're facing, of course. And yeah, I agree with everything you said, so I don't have anything to add here.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think one other character I mentioned at the beginning of this was the use of Booster Gold. And part of the reason I like to use Booster Gold is his 3rd move hits so hard. I can often even take out Donna Troy in 1 hit. And the reason for that is because if you're pairing with Red Hood, who we talked about as the best bleeder, if you can get that first kill, even against a team like Hal Jordan, where he has the debuff immunity on his team, once you get that first kill, if you have the team lead ability with Red Hood, he'll steal all that debuff immunity, which then allows you to begin to apply all the bleeds to a team like a Hal Jordan lead. So that's why I mentioned Booster at the beginning, pairing well with some of these bleed compositions, just to get that first kill.
Yeah, Booster Gold is good. Then again, availability. But I agree with you. A Booster Gold, I have him level 70 gear 11, so he definitely is good. Now, because I think for me, he's, I think, L3 or L4. I don't think I've L4'd him yet. I could be wrong. But yeah, I haven't personally seen him take out Donna Troy on his own with his 3rd ability. But that's because I don't use him very often. But I do. I'm gonna take your word for that one. Well, that's a funny scene. That's why I laughed a little bit. Him taking out Donna Troy with like his 3rd hit.
Oh, you mean like out on a date?
Yeah. Anyway,
He might be interested. You never know.
You never know. He'd be like, "Hey, Donna,
hey, what are you doing this weekend?"
Exactly. But with that being said, unless you want to say something more, Bizarro?
No, I think we've pretty well covered it.
Yeah, today's episode has been very lucrative, I hope, and you guys have learned something from it. So do remember to comment down below. We are always looking for your feedback, and we are always happy to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe for our weekly episodes. And yeah, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Hello.